Well, trying to read Trump's mind is a dangerous thing. You know, when you gaze into the abyss gazes into you. And so I worry about that.
And everybody's talking Texas because of the big primary yesterday that settled. Well, what did it settle? What was the message that the voters in the Lone Star State sent to the rest of the country? To answer that question, we have the great privilege of speaking with Kevin Williamson, who is national correspondent at the Dispatch. And prior to joining the company in 2022, he spent 15 years as a writer and editor at National Review and worked as the theater critic at the New Criterion and had a long career also local newspapers. He is a writer in residence at the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Well, actually, the competitive primaries on both sides of the aisle in Texas, uh, one of them is still unsettled. What's the message that people who are voting in the Lone Star State sent to the rest of the country, Kevin?
Well, I think both parties were asked for this Senate race to choose between the relatively trollish, populist candidate who riles up the base and a relatively responsible, if maybe somewhat boring and more moderate seeming in many ways candidate. And the Democrats decided to go with their relatively moderate candidate, a mild-mannered Presbyterian seminarian who is in some ways, Tallarico is his name, in some ways to the left of Jasmine Crockett on some of the issues, but he speaks in a kind of rhetorically more moderate sort of way. So it's a moderation of rhetoric more than a moderation of substance.
Yeah, when you
And the
say
Democrats seem to have rallied behind him.
when you say someone is a Presbyterian seminarian, that kind of indicates moderation, doesn't it?
Depends on what kind of Presbyterians we're talking about here. Presbyterians come in different flavors.
Yeah.
He is I believe, a PCUSA guy, pretty liberal Presbyterians. As a Catholic, the people I trust least are kind of liberal mainline Protestants. You're kind of bomb throwing hardcore reform types who just want to fight with me about things that happened in 1493. I have more to talk about with, it seems sometimes, but so he's a nice liberal Presbyterian. His opponent suggested that the party would be tempted to rally behind, as she put it, and I quote, the safest white boy they could find, and it seems like that's more or less what they have done. On the Republican side, things are unresolved. It will be heading toward a primary runoff. So John Cornyn, who has been in the Senate for 24 years, he's a six-term incumbent who is a pretty conservative guy. As I pointed out in my piece, that if he'd been a senator in the Reagan years, he would have been one of the most conservative senators in the caucus. In our time, he's seen as kind of a moderate squish because he's not as much of a bomb-throwing, insult comic, very online social media troll as people would like for him to be. And, in the Republican Party, and this is true to a lesser extent, the Democratic Party, though also true, but in the Republican Party, you're largely judged by who hates you. And so Ken Paxton drives all the right people crazy. And so even though he is this wildly corrupt, scandal-plagued guy who you couldn't make, I've given up trying to write satire about this period in our history. You just couldn't make him up. I always say my favorite British political controversy was when Boris Johnson was accused of slacking on the job because he was trying to finish up the biography of Shakespeare he was writing because he needed money to pay for his divorce. That's like one that never happens in the United States. But Ken Paxton had a political controversy in which we had to answer the question, when you've been sort of outed for adultery and your estranged wife who's about to start divorce proceedings against you happens to be a state senator, does she have to recuse herself from your impeachment hearings? I think that was the first time that one had come up, and which she did. Well, she stayed on the court, but she didn't vote on the conviction. So he's a real kind of 21st century grotesque.
Well, what is Trump going to endorse him, though? That's the big question. Now, Trump hasn't endorsed either Paxton or Cornyn. And Cornyn is the more calm. He's not a centrist because he's, as you point out, deeply conservative. If you look at historical records, even in Texas, And John Cornyn, who was also at
And a
one
guy
time,
like everyone else who survived in Republican politics, has become very Trumpy too. I mean, he's a Trump loyalist these days. It's not,
yeah.
kind of
So
independent.
where is Trump going to go?
Um,
Is it likely he endorses Paxton?
well, trying to read Trump's mind is a dangerous thing. When you gaze into the abyss gazes into you. And so I worry about that. So I assume this is what he's thinking. He didn't want to endorse in the primary because he knew it was going to be very close, and he doesn't like to back candidates who lose. He doesn't want to look like a loser or be associated with losers. I think, kind of MAGA tribalism would pull him in Paxton's direction. But I also think he's got people around him who are smart enough to say that Paxton probably is the weaker candidate in a general election, even in Texas. And with Democrats likely to take the House and have a majority come January, the likelihood of a third Trump impeachment is non-trivial. And he has to be counting senators up there. I think he wants to make sure that he holds on to every senator that he can. And I don't think he's very inclined at this point probably to take a risk on that. So I imagine that's his calculation. Do I do the MAGA thing, or do I risk losing a senator when I expect probably also to lose the House? Now, of course, it would take more than just a small Democratic majority in the Senate to impeach, convict, and remove Trump in a third impeachment. But I think even having a small Democratic majority in the Senate would inconvenience him in all sorts of other ways. Not that Congress apparently does anything anymore. So I guess
and
we've
by
got
the way,
war in Venezuela, Iran, and Ecuador now. And
what is the position of Ken Paxton on the war? Because he certainly has been identified with the isolationist wing, more isolationist wing of the Republican Party. Is he supporting President Trump in the war in Iran?
well, I would note that probably the most prominent spokesman for the isolationist wing of the party in public life right now has been J.D. Vance, and he's found
Yeah.
his way around to supporting it. So, these guys all work off of the same fundamental principle, which is no principle other than Trump is right. And what Trump wants, we're going to say yes to, and we'll fill it. It's like when William Jennings Bryan one time was asked about might have been free silver or something like that. And he said, well, the people are for it, so I'm for it, and I will look up the arguments later.
And okay, so they can look up the arguments for the
So
war
if
as
Trump's
it
for it, they're
proceeds.
for it. And then the Heritage Foundation will think up some stuff in a month and let you know why it was really the right conservative position all along.
Okay, and
But
then
if
what
Trump wants it, Trump
happens?
gets it.
A lot of people on the Democratic side seem to want Paxton to win because they would have a better chance of beating him
Yeah.
than they would have of beating Cornyn. Do you think that's correct?
Yeah, I think they should be careful what they wish for, because while I do think they have a better chance at beating Paxton than beating Cornyn, I don't think they've got a great chance at beating either one of them. And so, they've done this stuff before. It's been very successful. When Schumer and those guys were backing all these, really hardcore Trumpist candidates in congressional races a few years back, Democrats won those races. They succeeded by getting the most extreme candidates out there and supporting the Republicans. Whether that would work for a Senate race in Texas, yeah, I wouldn't bet my own money on it.
Okay, I'm not sure that the Stephen Colbert support for Tallarico actually is going to tip the balance in the Lone Star State. The piece is hilarious, it's insightful, and it's worth reading. It's also posted on our website at michaelmedved.com.